this computer. Hey everybody, I'm Jeff. My co-host Charlie is here, and this is the episode 2 of, what's it called, Charlie?
Happiness and Elliott Smith Webcast.
Good, I forgot for a second. We had so many different names. No, but Charlie came up with happiness right away, and I liked it. So, our guest today is Rob Comba. Is that how you say your last name?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Rob Comba, and he hosts the amazingly great podcast, My Favorite Elliott Smith Song, which you can hear on all the streaming sites out there. I'm sure I listen to it on Spotify, but you can find it everywhere, where he speaks to pretty well-known, very well-known, different levels of well-known people talking about their favorite Elliott Smith song. And then his co-producer and co-host Elizabeth is on here too. So I think we're going to maybe start talking with Rob about everything, and then maybe chronologically when Elizabeth's time and space comes in. You can talk whenever you want, Elizabeth. So Charlie, do you want, we kind of just have a conversation. I don't really consider it an interview.
Yeah, sure.
I got to sort of start with some questions to get the ball rolling. So Charlie, do you have any beginning questions?
Well, I'm not to start off with. I think generally speaking, I personally like to know just a little background about where everybody's coming from when they're getting into Elliott and stuff like that. So I was just curious, Rob, what were the early beginnings of you discovering Elliott Smith?
Yeah, well, I think I first got into Elliott Smith when my sister, who's actually on this Zoom call right now, gave me for birthday or Christmas when I was about 15 a compilation CD from the label and shop Rough Trade, which had loads of singer-songwriters on, and one of them was Elliott Smith, and it was Needle in the Hay. And so that was sort of my first introduction to Elliott Smith. And then I think from there, it was around that sort of time where a lot of people kind of getting into different types of music, and some friends from school were into the same kind of music as me. And I think one or two of them already had some Elliott Smith albums. So we were trading CDs, and then I was given by a friend I think it was the self-titled album. So kind of from there, I wouldn't say that it was, I was even immediately taken with it. I think with Elliott Smith, well, for me at least, it wasn't something that I listened to it first time and I really got it straight away. It was something that I think probably ended up taking a couple of years to really click. But then when it did click, it really kind of grabbed me.
Can you tell me what year was that when you were 15?
So
my secret way of asking your age.
He's writing it down.
Yeah, never ask a man his age. I'm 30 years old. I turned 15 in 2005.
Okay.
In October,
I just
2005.
like to know the perspective of was Elliott alive? Was
So yeah.
So he
was obviously a couple of years dead at that point. And it wasn't really I was seeing the CD, the song was on a CD with loads of other artists, so I hadn't even really sort of placed him or who he was within that kind of context. So it wasn't for a little while where I really sort of understood that this actually was an artist who had died a couple of years prior to me listening to him. And then from there, I sort of understood more about, his whole story really.
Yeah, well, I think those years when you're I started listening to that kind of music. Well, he wasn't around when I was 13, but 13, 14, 15 is, like you said, just when you really start exploring so many different types of music and expanding what you know. Needle in the Hay was the first song that I heard by him too, but that's
I think it's the same for a lot of people. That's the song
I found the 7-inch at a record store. This is back when it was brand new. That's how old I am. So, yeah.
How about you, Elizabeth?
Oh, I know, it's such a hard question. Like, I don't know why, but I sort of, I'm older than Rob. I missed Elliott Smith in the 90s, in the late 90s. For some reason, and I listened to a lot of music, but I hadn't come across him yet. So it was the early 2000s. I think somebody gave me a copy of XO, and I like listened to it just on repeat, like endlessly in my car, like when cars had CD players. And then I slowly just started moving into the other albums. And even, I really took my time. Like I would listen to, a whole album completely for, months and even a year before I would move on to the next one. And especially after he passed away, I kept that pace slow. Like, okay, I can keep this slower pace. This music will be new to me for years to come.
Well,
Like
that's awesome that you did.
You don't want to binge on it and then it's over. But.
Yeah.
Well,
were you in LA at that time?
I was in LA, and I remember I would put that XO into my CD player in my car, and I was like driving a lot on the 101. Like it's like I very much remember that stretch of the highway that I was driving a lot when I heard it all the time.
Yeah, I have specific memories like that too. But you weren't able to see him play in this?
I wasn't. Yeah, no, I didn't get the opportunity, unfortunately.
Yeah, there weren't too many shows left at that point, depending on what year it was exactly. But XO is a good place to start with. Go ahead, Charlie.
No, I was going to ask Rob. So, what else were you listening to at the time? Like what were maybe some roads that kind of maybe connected you to that music, to Elliott's music?
I think that I was really into a lot of at that time, which was like the mid 2000s in the UK. What was really popular was like guitar, lots of guitar bands. So the Libertines had become really popular just a couple of years beforehand. The Arctic Monkeys were basically just starting out at that point. So I was really getting into them, and sort of their star was rising as I was getting more and more into music. So it was quite like exciting seeing them at increasingly bigger venues as they were becoming bigger and bigger. It's mainly like a lot of guitar music, Radiohead. It was probably more bands than any particular solo artist, but the biggest connection was definitely anything that was guitar led. And I was also quite into The Enemy. The magazine still had quite a strong influence over here at that point. So it was almost anything that was in there. I was like, I need to check this band out, or I need to find out who this is. And Elliott was in The Enemy kind of periodically. Obviously he wasn't alive at that point, but there were references to him here and there. So when I saw his name on that CD, I think I was already kind of aware of him, that The Enemy thought this guy was good, so he probably was all right. I think I was quite heavily influenced by what other people thought at that time.
Yeah. And so
a lot of us were. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Jeff.
No, I'm just going on The Enemy thing. A lot of us were. I loved like reading The Enemy in the 90s and stuff, like all the Britpop and all that stuff. But Charlie's staying on track here.
Jeff's totally into the vintage magazine scene. So
I just kept everything I ever bought. I don't collect them like after the fact. I just never threw anything away. So I posted a lot of stuff from old magazines and stuff.
Yeah.
Keep going, Charlie.
So, I was just gonna say. So what really like kicked when it comes to Elliott fandom music? What really kicked it in for you then? Because it sounds like both you and Elizabeth kind of had the slow like growth of loving Elliott's music. For this question for both of you, what really kind of just like boom, this is really important for yourselves or your
Elizabeth, do you want to go first?
Sure. I would just find myself coming back to his music. Like before, the Spotify playlist tells you how many gazillions of times you listen to things. I think my husband could have said like, okay, you're listening to Elliott Smith all of the time. Like every time I walk, past your studio, that I hear that, or every time we're in the car. And I would listen to it. And then sometimes I would, say take a month off and I wouldn't listen to him at all. And then I would put in one of his albums and I'd be like, oh, this is what my life was missing. Like, oh, now I feel so much better. I'm listening to this again.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it was back then, I was probably, what I would do is I would play my PlayStation with the sound down and have a CD on in the background. I think this was even just slightly before like aux cables became a big thing. So it would just be, just play one CD and just play it through. And I guess I remember just playing Elliott Smith more and more, and with each listen becoming more and more interested in it. And then it just started really clicking for me, I suppose. And from then on, I think, as I said, I think before the self-titled record I had, maybe one or two others, I think I had Figure Eight. And then from there, just went out and tried to get the rest of the albums and became a much bigger fan.
And so have you guys, has it gone further than that too? Like Heatmiser, have you like listened to Heatmiser from that point on, and maybe even Number Two, bands like that? Has that expanded?
I have to be honest, like with Heatmiser, I've listened to them, and it was only really, I think, when the Torment Saint book came out. And I think at that point, this was like 7 or 8 years ago, I think, wasn't it, that book came out? And I think I bought the book and I read it, and it really reconnected me with Elliott Smith. And I hadn't been huge into Heatmiser before that, but that sort of turned me on to maybe the more at the point of Heatmiser where Elliott was having more control, the Mike City Suns stage, where he's got a little bit more control, and you have songs like Half Right and Plainclothes Man are my more favorite Heatmiser songs, really, I suppose.
Right.
Because obviously because they're basically just like a song that you might hear on an Elliott Smith album. The Heatmiser sound is a little bit kind of too aggressive for me, I think.
Gotcha. How about you, Elizabeth?
It's similar for me. Yeah, I listen to Heatmiser here and there, but it's not, I don't come back to the music like I listen to Elliott Smith's. And it's I like, when it's him playing guitar, like I like that that sound. I seem to just gravitate to more.
How about you, Charlie?
Do I listen to Heatmiser?
Yeah, I'm just curious. I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I'm just curious about you. My answer is basically about the same as theirs, like same pretty much.
I don't chase the early stuff as much as I do, Mike City Suns and Cop and Speeder. And I really love the singles as well, that came out on Cavity Search. And so yes, I do. And I actually, a couple of days ago, I got the newer versions or remastered versions of the Number Two records that Neil has been doing. So yeah, so I do like that mix of Elliott and Neil together, and it's music that I continue to
I think that when if Elliott just had like his studio albums was all you could listen to, it would be maybe more easy to go like, now I need to go listen to some more Heatmiser. But the unreleased Elliott stuff is like almost never ending, that it's like you almost can't stop just going down that road, because there's just, and as an old person, like I'll be like, wait, what is this unreleased Elliott Smith song on YouTube? And like, oh yeah, I listened to that like a month ago. Like I'm re-experiencing it because I can't keep it all straight in my head like people who are much younger than me seem to be able to do. So Seems like his
So we
solo
have to
stuff.
work on a checklist.
I know. Yeah, I'm sort of doing that. Yeah.
So, I was going to ask both of you as well, is like, obviously, it seems like we're all probably involved in media and somehow we enjoy it, either as fans enjoy it. Do you guys have any background in media, like, or is this Elizabeth looks like she does? Like, it looks like, are you a photographer?
She's got the right setup.
Yes, and Rob only has a plant behind him. So
I'm a gardener.
Yes, and a TV for the PlayStation game. So I was just wondering if you guys have media background by chance.
I think we have different background. Rob definitely has some, but I'm a visual artist, so my background is in photography and film.
Cool.
But Rob has more of a proper background.
Yeah, I worked in a radio station for a while, which and sort of understood more about audio production from there. And then in my sort of professional life, I work in communications I'm mainly focusing on a lot of like media production within that as well. So yeah, so I do have a bit of experience in that, which kind of led me towards knowing how to make a podcast. I already knew how to make a podcast before I started my favorite Elliott Smith song. So that's kind of how I arrived at it from a technical perspective.
And were you on air personality already as well?
Not really. No, a couple of brief appearances, but no more than that. It was a local radio station in Bristol in the West Country of England. If you guys know where that is.
I know of the Bristol.
Yeah.
I've seen it on a map once or twice.
Yeah.
That was a good question, Charlie. I was wondering the same thing because it comes across. I have a podcast that nobody listens to that has to do with talking to people about music, and I have it's so low tech and no theme song, no, like the audio is mediocre, and like your podcast, I was like, you've got to, I was curious about that background too, and I mean, I have nothing other than amazing things to say. And my favorite thing about it, well, not my favorite thing, but I like that it's focused on a song, which means it can be short and to the point, kind of. It's like 20 minutes or so. And my podcast where I talk to people about their experiences going to concerts and stuff with like local music friends of mine, people just love to talk about music. Like some of them are like 2.5 hours, and it's just, nobody's going to listen to all that. It's like too ridiculous. So it's like, it's just the perfect, people say what they need to say. And, it's not like, oh shoot, I got to listen to this thing that's 2.5 hours. It's like, I got 20 minutes right now. I'm going to listen to an episode. So,
well, I personally, to give you props too, Rob, is that, and Elizabeth, is that I actually, at the beginning, it was actually probably shorter, correct? And then now it's kind of expanded a little bit longer. Where it's brought in more information and stuff like that. And I really love that aspect too.
I think initially, and this was like in the very early stages, I was kind of reluctant, I think, to make the episodes longer, and I was cutting quite a bit out of interviews because I was thinking like, oh, people don't want to listen to too much. Let's keep it short. But then I started working with Elizabeth, and we were able to do as a pair, we could just cover a lot more people, and we could make just a better all-round production, I think. And there were, as listeners started to grow a little bit, people were saying that they wanted longer episodes, and it got to a point where it felt a bit like maybe we'll just make the episodes just generally a bit longer because that's what people who are listening are saying that they want. So we'll see. The great thing about doing a podcast is you can monitor, like you can see how many people are listening, and I was just always thinking like, well, I'll just make them. People say they want longer episodes. I'll make them a bit longer. If they are a bit longer, I can see if people stop listening to it, and then I make them shorter again. So that was the basic approach. I think because I'd worked at a radio station in as like a news person, everyone, the whole like ethos there was like things need to be short and to the point and snappy. And I think as I started doing more podcasting, I realized that there was probably more of a happy medium between that really long, like 2-hour conversations that Jeff was talking about and the kind of really short, snappy, newsy soundbite stuff. So yeah, that's what we're trying to achieve.
Right. And so, Elizabeth, did you have like experience interviewing anybody?
No, I mean, I'm, like I said, I'm a visual artist. I do different things where I'm seeking people to participate. So I've done a lot of audio stuff before, just with my own work. And I like, just as a person, I love talking to strangers, and I will like, taking an airplane and sitting next to somebody, I'll like ask somebody like 100 questions, like if they're, willing to allow me to do so. So.
Cool.
I have a question. Oh, go ahead, Charlie. I have a question for Rob. When you were like, okay, I guess going back, what was it, like a slow kind of process? Like, I wonder if I should do something media-wise, a podcast, and it like took you a few weeks to like kind of formulate this idea? Or did you just be like, I want to have a podcast about talking to people about their favorite Elliott Smith song, boom, like it just popped into your head one day? Like, how did you formulate this idea?
I think it was a few of those things combined. I think I was sort of thinking at some level like I wanted to do a podcast, to try a podcast, because I kind of knew how to do it. So I was sort of at some level thinking of ideas. I am a massive Elliott Smith fan, and I was always like very interested by reading articles about other, mostly musicians, who I really liked in the present era. This is like 2017, I think. At that time, there were lots of these artists who were coming through, speaking to magazines, publications, saying how big an influence Elliott Smith was on them. And I was, so it was making me think a lot about, wow, like Elliott Smith, people still really like him today, and I still really like him today. And there was nowhere there wasn't really a podcast that Elliott Smith fans could go to. And there was obviously Sweet Adeline, which is an incredible resource, and there's so much amazing content that Charlie has gathered over the years, which is just incredible. But in podcasting was becoming bigger, and there wasn't something in that niche, I guess you might call it. And there was the Heaven Adores You film, which was brilliant, but the audio thing wasn't quite there yet. And then I think the final thing was, I had previously seen when Louis Theroux met Elliott I think it was in 2000 in London. They met each other for a magazine feature, and I'd seen that before, but then I came across it again, and I thought, like, oh, this is a really interesting story. Like, I love Elliott Smith's music. I really like Louis Theroux's documentaries. And I was like, I do want to start this podcast. Elliott Smith thing is quite good. And then somehow I just came on the idea of doing it song by song. And I thought, oh, actually, that might work. And so I thought I would, based on having just read that Louis Theroux article, I thought I would ask him if he would, I would tell him about this idea and say that I would like him to be the first guest. And fortunately, it was just, I didn't know him at all beforehand, but, I looked up his agent's details online, and fortunately, I think it was a kind of a right place at the right time moment when, you probably have all had this at certain stages on different projects where you have a kind of a dream person that you want to work with on something, and you just manage to catch them at the right time, where he had just finished a big filming project. He had a bit of time. He was, I think, maybe looking to do something that wasn't quite related to his own work, and it just slightly grabbed his attention a bit, and he very kindly said yes. And That wasn't an intentional Elliott Smith pun, by the way, on the say yes. But he said yes, and just kind of went from there, really.
If he didn't say, if he didn't say okay, if he didn't agree,
Everything's okay.
do you think that you would have just moved on to somebody else? Like, 'cause I've had that kind of happen where like I have an idea for something, I get nowhere on it at the beginning, and it's like, all right, I guess I'm just not going to do that. Like, did you pretty much have like, I'm going to do this, and if this person says no, okay, I'm going to go to the next person? Or like, were you sort of doubtful, but that really like boosted, like, okay, this is going to work?
I think it might have just completely gone away if he had said no, to be honest. Because I was thinking at the time, like, if I do this, it needs to start with a big name to kick it off. And yeah, maybe if he had said no, I wouldn't have gone ahead with it at all. It might have been a while before I put anything out. But yeah, I mean, fortunately, he did say he would be up for doing it. So so then it went on from there.
Awesome. Go ahead, Charlie.
I was just gonna ask you, so are you doing it from home when you initially started it out, or I'm
trying to think. I mean, obviously we're doing it all from home now, or for the last series we were doing it all from home. But yeah, it was mainly because, and it was in the first few interviews, I think it was all pretty much done remotely, because I think most of the guests were based in the US. I don't think, apart from Louis Theroux, who's obviously British as well, but I didn't actually interview him in person. I think pretty much all were based in the US. And yeah, I mean, like, and when Elizabeth came on board, which was probably after maybe like the 6th or 7th episode or so, I was trying to think about that earlier. I couldn't quite remember the exact number, but when Elizabeth and I were talking initially, you know, it was a lot of guests of the show were based in, I mean, almost like specifically in LA, and Elizabeth as well as you guys know lives in LA. So yeah, it was sort of like this would be really, really helpful and amazing to have someone who can interview people in person in LA, and we can add to the list of guests on the podcast.
Did you have a list of people before Elizabeth joined that you wanted to chase early on, that you thought you had, again, because of the time period, you know, like for example, we had to arrange this time to talk. Was there people you're kind of leaning more towards because of that, those kind of hurdles and stuff like that?
I mean, there still is a long list of people that we want to talk to, and I guess there will always be. But yeah, I think with Elizabeth coming on board to the podcast, I think that it was great to have somebody who had, you know, like a slightly different perspective from me, especially as we live in two completely different countries, have different backgrounds. So it was really helpful to have somebody who was like, well, actually, you know, I've actually heard that this person might be an Elliott Smith fan, or because yeah, Elizabeth has different connections and works in a different area to what I work in. She could have some new suggestions and bring, I think, something different to the table, which was really helpful.
So did Elizabeth just contact you and say like, hey, I think I could help you with this, if it's okay to talk about? I think that if that's the story, like, hey, I'm a fan of this thing and I want to be a part of it, that I love stories that like the person who started it isn't like, no, this is my thing, like that you were open to that, if that's what the story is.
Yeah. Elizabeth was like, this podcast is awful, but I
that's what I was trying to avoid saying.
Yeah, I can make it better. No, I think it was on Twitter, wasn't it, Elizabeth? You contacted me.
Yeah, I had listened. I think the first 4 episodes were out, And I think I follow Louis Theroux on Twitter. I think that's how I first came across it. And then when I came across that one, I was like, oh, there's more. So I listened to those first 4 that were out, and I was like, this is the greatest idea. Like, this is so fantastic. But then when I looked into it more, like you were promoting it through your Twitter account, and there wasn't like a, like a base for it. So I reached out to Rob, and I'm like, this is fantastic. Like, this is such a great podcast. This is like a great idea. I think, you should make it bigger. Like, you should be a website. You should have some social media accounts that are just devoted to it to, just grow, people's interest in it to, make it a little bit more universal. And, Rob was, certainly willing to listen to my thoughts and my excitement about what he had created and what I thought I could do to help.
Yeah. I mean, when Elizabeth contacted me, it was quite exciting because I'd had, as Elizabeth said, I was just doing it all through my own very limited social media accounts, and there was nothing really formal. And I think when Elizabeth was saying, like, I could come on, create a website, have our own social media accounts, and all of these things. Yeah, it was really exciting. And I think it has in those, I mean, it's coming up to 3 years probably since we first spoke. And yeah, it's just made the whole thing so much more professional. Beforehand, I was just kind of recording interviews whenever I could. And then with working with Elizabeth, it meant that we had like a set schedule of when we would put out episodes, and it just made it more of a thing, really, rather than just something that I was actually doing occasionally in my spare time when I could find someone to interview. It made it like actually more of a genuine show that had a actual sort of feel to it, I suppose.
How much do you know how much interaction there is, like, people with the website? I almost forgot. I remember seeing the website when I first knew of the podcast, but now with, like, I just go on Spotify or I follow the account. I mean, having that social media, like the Instagram account for the show, is like super key to me. That it's almost like this day and age, websites are sometimes important and sometimes less because of social media.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's, I think it's a good way when just people are generally like searching online for Elliott
yeah.
Smith, like they'll come across it. So they might discover us through there.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. I mean, social media is definitely a big thing. But
it's definitely good to have the site, like better to have it than not. But yeah, if you're some people don't use Instagram and things like that. So like you said, when they search.
And especially with, Elliott Smith has a broad age range of listeners. So, you certainly catch the younger listeners for sure on social media, but some of the older ones, you might capture them more through the website.
Makes sense.
I was wondering kind of, you guys are pretty consistent about releasing shows through the seasons, like almost weekly. I was just wondering what the process is like doing that. Is it fair to say that you have like a good number of shows already kind of in the can by the time the season starts? I was just wondering if that was the case.
Yeah. I mean, as we've gone on, I think we've become better at doing that. I think now it's more of a case of like trying to have, like, for the last season, which we did, which ran from maybe it was like May time to October or November or something like that. We had a lot of those planned out already before we started doing it, and we had recorded quite a few and had booked in interviews. Whereas in the early days, it was a bit of a scramble sometimes to find people to meet the release dates. But now I think we're better at as the podcast grows and we have made better connections with PRs and with people's management and that kind of stuff, then you just have an additional layer of being able to find guests where you don't have to. And initially, either Elizabeth or I or both of us would be doing a lot of Googling, doing our own research, whereas over time we have people have come to us and said, oh, I know this person, or a PR would say like, I work with this band, would you be interested in speaking to them? So it becomes a bit easier to have that schedule of having one every 2 weeks, and being able to plan them in.
Cool. So you this year, was it 2000? Yeah, 2020. Oh, it's already like months now.
Yeah.
But season 3 is complete, and
Yeah.
I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit right now. But is season 4 kind of being worked on right now? Is it in pre-production?
Yeah, it's fair to say the early stages of pre-production, but we have started some conversations on that. So yeah, we're hoping, I think, to launch that in the early summertime. So probably around May, probably June, really, I would guess.
Cool.
Great.
You can follow us on social media for updates about that.
Yes, definitely. On my other podcast that I do that it's way too long, my long podcast, I'll always ask the person like, what social media should people follow you on at the end of it? And I'm like, shoot, nobody's even. I started to say like a couple episodes, I was like, if you're still listening to this 2 hours into it, like message me on Instagram and I'll like send you a free record, or like I'll give you a prize. And like I never got any nobody. So I learned, wait, you gotta tell people to promote their social media and stuff early on. So the Instagram is my fave
Smith song.
Smith song.
Yeah, it's the same across all of them actually. So we're on
Smith.
Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.
And fave is good because the favorite is spelled differently in the different countries.
Yeah. Well, stupidly, when I was creating the name for the podcast, I wasn't thinking with the American audience in mind. So
I like it. I always love seeing the British spelling of stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's fair enough. There's a lot of stuff that comes out of the US.
I think I saw a picture of you with Phoebe Bridgers, like at her show. Is that true?
Yes. Yeah.
So have you talked to people not in person, like over, not in person for these interviews, but then later on met them like that?
More times. Yeah. A couple of times. With Phoebe Bridgers was one when she was playing in London. That was a couple of years ago. She was playing in London. Who else? Marissa Nadler when she was playing over here. There's been a couple of people. Yeah, if they've been coming over, have met them. Elizabeth, have you met anyone after the interview in LA?
Not anybody that I haven't interviewed in person. I mean, I think this past year was the big year of not interviewing people in person because of COVID, but there hasn't been any way to see music. So
yeah.
I mean, all your guests. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, Elizabeth has done from the Elliott Smith podcast, has done some other cool Elliott Smith related projects off the back of it. The one I'm thinking about in particular is the Happiness video.
Right. That's what's funny when this was called Happiness. Yeah, I made a video project, which is a 25 channel composite that has 25 different, it's sampling 25 different musicians from YouTube, all singing Elliott Smith's Happiness. So you hear each of them, kind of do a little part, and you're seeing them all at the same time.
Wow, that's cool.
Is that on YouTube, I guess?
It's not. It's not. It goes out to exhibitions and galleries. Okay. So it's not readily available.
Okay. Makes sense why we maybe didn't quite know about it.
Yeah. The other thing that we did in 2019, the other time that we met people who'd been on the podcast was in the summer of 2019 on what would have been Elliott Smith's 50th birthday. We did a live tribute show in London, which was really good. Which we worked on that with a musician who also lives in London called Dan Caleb, and we had Max Bloom, who was from Yuck. who's been a guest on the podcast. A guy called Ben Langford Biss, who was in a band called As It Is, who was a guest on the podcast. They both played at the show because they were, they're probably like the only two musicians who live locally to me, who were around at the time, because obviously most people are based in America. But Elizabeth was working on some stuff in Europe that summer as well, so she came over and was in London for that. So that was a really good night. And all the money that we raised for went to charity, and it was just, it was amazing to meet, obviously, to see again the people that have been on the podcast, but also just to meet loads of Elliott Smith fans. It was a really good turnout, and just and such a good evening.
Sounds awesome.
It was busy too. We did not know like how big it could be, like how many people are going to come, and it ended up we were way full.
How many people were there? How many people probably?
I think it's like 200 in the end.
Nice.
Initially we were looking at booking a venue that had capacity of about 30 people. And we were thinking we might struggle to get numbers. But the turnout was incredible. We were just, really good lineup and really lucky. And it's a great evening.
That's great.
Well,
I was really happy to see, sorry, Charlie.
No, it's okay.
Jessica Dobson, when I saw that she had an episode, because she grew up, well, I don't know if she grew up, but she's from right around where I am, Orange County, Long Beach. And so I saw like her bands before Deep Sea Diver, when she had like a band that was called Margot Lee, and then she would play shows just as Jessica Dobson. And so I've been a fan of hers since, I don't know, the early 2000s. And I feel people that know Deep Sea Diver love Deep Sea Diver, but I feel like they're not as big as they should be or something. I don't know. They kind of fly under the radar a little bit. But anyways, I wanted to mention that episode as being one that I was really happy to see, somebody that I was an old time fan of.
I can't remember what song that she picked.
I don't either, but it's been a while since I listened. Go ahead, Charlie.
Oh, I was gonna say, how do you guys feel about the reaction? Because you guys actually have like done pretty big things. Like you've had your own tribute concert, and then there's the CD that I was hoping to maybe talk about later towards the end, to help promote it too. How do you feel about the reaction that you guys have gotten in such a short amount of time?
It's been really good. It's just been really, everyone's that listens is very nice. It's been so good kind of connecting with people and talking to Elliott Smith fans. A real highlight for me was that tribute show in London, because that's when it felt more exciting, because people that I'd spoken to on email or spoken to on Twitter or Facebook or whatever, seeing them in person and actually it feeling like it was more of a community thing was really nice. Because obviously doing a podcast, especially doing so many episodes remotely, and also that was the first time that I'd met Elizabeth. Well, the only time I'd met Elizabeth in person as well. It was it was a big few days. It just felt a lot more real, that moment, and a lot more exciting because all of it had been done, just me at my laptop or at my phone speaking to people, but actually getting to see people in person and talking about Elliott Smith and hearing people play his music was the best moment for me so far, I think.
Wow, that's awesome. So Elizabeth, you flew to the UK for the show, and
I was working on this art project. I'd actually taken a boat across the Atlantic for a project that I was working on, and then I was in Ireland to work on the project for a few weeks prior to that, and then planned a week in London, and it just lined up well with my schedule that it I was already planning to be over in Europe at that time of, so it was really nice. It was, nice to meet Rob in person and, experience that show, which was great. I think the sort of Elliott Smith network is a certain type of person. Like people who really like Elliott Smith's music have responded, very well. But we also, try to put a diverse group of guests together so that we can reach new audiences and new people. And it's always a focus of ours. I know a lot of times it always ends up, that we're talking to musicians for the most part, but we do try to weave in, the different types of people, or even, musicians who make music that is absolutely nothing like Elliott Smith, but it's really interesting to hear why, they're drawn to him.
Cool.
I was at this local show a year and a half ago with like pretty hardcore, like screaming bands. And my friend was like friends with one of those guys. And he's like, oh, this guy wants to talk to you about Elliott Smith because he just loves Elliott Smith, this guy that was just like screaming his head off at the show. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. Let's talk about Elliott. Yeah, people like Elliott that like all kinds of different music and perform all kinds of different music.
I have another question. I know one of the for someone like me who's like totally into the whole Elliott universe thing. One of the cool things that your podcast kind of did was interview the guys from New Monkey, and B, actually run your show through Elliott's board, the Trident board, and then basically, produce the show through New Monkey. I think Elizabeth probably leans more towards that end of it because she lives in LA. But can you talk about like the whole how that happened, where you got to run the show through New Monkey as well?
Well, I'll let kind of Rob start out. He had kind of started the conversation with those guys and had recorded part of the interview, and then I actually went to the studio, which was great. Which again was part of my pitch to Rob of like why you need somebody here in the U.S. in Los Angeles. So it was really interesting for me to go to that studio. To meet and talk to them in person, but that was pretty much a joint venture between the two of us. He had really set up a lot of that beforehand, and we just kind of worked together to put it together.
Yeah. I mean, I had started a conversation with them. I've been speaking to them for a while. There's three of them who really run it. Joel and Robert are the main two owners, but Greg Cortez, who you guys may know, was kind of really the person who was pushing it through, who works with Joel and Robert. But they're so busy doing various things, particularly Joel and Robert are never really around that much. And so it was a real long running thing of trying to get an episode where we could have Greg, Joel and Robert just all featured within the episode. Because I think particularly those two, I think they were really keen for them both to feature, because I don't think either of them wanted to be seen as more than the other being connected with the legacy of Elliott in more of a way than the other person. So it was really important for them both to be on it. And that was, one of the great things about having Elizabeth working on the podcast was that she could go to the studio and really, just like bring this whole thing to life, I suppose, and make a really strong connection with New Monkey and build a really good relationship with them. And having it like effectively produced by them in the studio was like a huge honor, and was, for me as an Elliott Smith fan, I think I completely forgotten about that until you just mentioned it now, Charlie. But I remember the feeling at the time when they said it. I was like, wow, this is incredible. This is more than I could have ever dreamed of when we started it out. And I think ever since that time, and ever since Elizabeth went to visit them, Greg and Robert and Joel have been really kind to us, and have been really good and helpful at promoting anything that we're doing. And we've tried to help them out in any small way that we can. With, I think, a couple of times they've been wanting to reach Elliott Smith fans, and we've shared a couple of things they've been working on. But yeah, I mean, it was such a huge privilege to be able to do that.
And how many shows did you guys do through them?
There was the one main one, but there was a spell at the end of the first series where Greg was helping us master quite a few of the episodes on the Trident board, which was pretty cool.
Cool. Which is also the board that Rush played through and Cat Stevens played through.
Yeah, it's amazing.
That's pretty cool. That's awesome. Let's see. You got a question, Jeff?
I have a weird question, and you don't have to actually answer the question, but answer the question about the question. Do you two get asked never or very often what your favorite Elliott Smith song is? I have a feeling somebody in your position will be like, nobody ever asked me that, or people ask me that every day. Like, do you get asked that a lot? But you don't have to say what your favorite is if you don't.
We get asked a lot, I would say.
Yeah, a lot.
Sometimes you hear people in that kind of position, like, nobody ever asked me that thing. But in this case, I guess it's yes. I don't know if you want to get into your favorite or not, but
I've got lots of. I've got for the episode where I interview myself.
Save that for the last episode.
I've got a few. Elizabeth, do you want? I always think that you've got what. You always seem to have a very distinct answer.
Well, I think Satellite is my answer many times. Happiness can be an answer some days. King's Crossing, I could say another day. So, I think we find this when we talk to the guests too, that I don't know if anybody really has just that one song. Like, it just depends on the day for me.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, the song that I'm really into at the moment is the band version of Christian Brothers. And
the Heatmiser?
Yeah. That's on the Heaven Adores You soundtrack was the first time that I came across it. And that just has like lately blown me away. But I was never really a huge Christian Brothers fan before, like getting properly into that song in the last couple of months. So I think it changes quite a lot for me, which is my favorite, I think.
It's weird. It's interesting. Like, I think somebody asked me, like, do you like the shows, like live recordings that are like full band or just Elliott playing a guitar? And in general, I like just Elliott playing a guitar, but the full band ones, I would like that I don't listen to them that much, but like when they do play like Needle in the Hay, like full band rocking out, like that's cool compared to like listening to a song that is rocking out on the album, like Bled White, and hearing it live. It's still good, course, but like hearing the quiet songs played all full band is kind of like a cool different experience.
Yeah, I think Christian Brothers really lends itself well to the full band, because there seems like there's quite a lot of anger in that song, and I think having the full band really helps bring it out, and I think playing it a bit louder plays well into the sort of the strengths of that song.
That makes me want to ask Elizabeth, did you see Elliott live at any point?
I didn't, and it's so unfortunate. I think I moved to Los Angeles the year before he passed away, and it's one of those things that I just feel like, I can't believe I never saw him live.
I have a lot of friends like that feel that way. But yeah, you would have had a few opportunities because he played once, I think, in 2002 in LA, and then a handful of times in 2003.
But we have all those live recordings. You had mentioned that you're listening to some of the unreleased tracks and so forth. That I find myself doing the same thing. Like I'll come across an unreleased track, or I'll see a live performance on YouTube, and it's kind of nice discovering these things.
Yeah, there's always new stuff to discover, it seems. Yeah.
Not to be on the negative side of things, I'm just wondering if because Jeff and I are learning this now too, is about asking people to be on the show and stuff like that. So obviously the people on your show are the people who are accepted, but then there's a list probably of people who have not maybe accepted yet, and you don't have to name anybody. I'm just wondering, is that, do you feel like it's a matter of time or just the way it is, and you won't chase that person again?
We continue to chase.
Yeah.
Keep trying.
Keep trying. Cool.
Yeah, I think you kind of get an understanding when people respond, whether they're somebody who isn't available at that time and you can get back in touch with them a little further down the line. And maybe there's a couple of times where you're like, this person definitely does not want to be on the podcast, and there's no way that I'm going to be able to get them on. So I think it's quite easy to work out and get a feel for whether this is somebody who can be persuaded. And there are some people, like with the New Monkey thing that we were talking about before, there are some people where it's a real kind of long process from when you make the initial contact to when you're able to speak to them. But there are some people where it happens where you might have started speaking to them like a year before, and then you get to record the interview.
Wow.
I'm going to send Charlie out talking to all those PR and management people tomorrow.
Yeah, I'll be knocking on some doors.
I don't know anything about that world. It's like, to me, like, I'm just, I don't know. I don't know or try to know details.
Well, I know the ones I would be intimidated by, and I or assume that probably would not be interested. But
But even the ones that might be interested, might be like how to best reach them. Because some people that I've messaged just about unrelated things, like artists, like they're not going to respond to their social media, but there's some other way to get to them, and then they might, it's knowing the ins and outs of that, I guess. But that's not my world to know very well. Charlie's the guy.
Yeah, well, I'm sure, Charlie, you've built up a lot of contacts over the years as well.
I have, but I'm so terrible at being one to follow up and be in contact on a regular basis. But I've gotten to meet some people, so that's
a lot of people really like and trust Charlie on a lot of things more than he realizes, I think. So that goes a long way too. When I posted about this, the first episode we did of this on Reddit, I posted about it and people were just like, tell Charlie how much we love him. Charlie's the best. Like, all the comments were about Charlie. So he doesn't want to believe it sometimes, but
I don't believe it.
He's a big
I've been a fan since before Charlie was a fan of Elliott Smith, but Sweet Adeline was just, in those early days of the internet, it was just, there was no Instagram, there was no Facebook, there was none of that stuff. It was like, you had to go to Sweet Adeline to like get the news. I went to like secret shows at like when Elliott played at the Silver Lake Lounge or Spaceland when he was already big. I knew because Charlie posted it on Sweet Adeline at 3 p.m. that day, and I got off of work and went right over there and got in line and stuff. And just, I still go to that site every day to look at like set lists and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, I remember the first time that I think it would probably been the Sweet Adeline Facebook page shared the podcast, and I was like, oh wow, okay, I feel like this is a kind of a seal of approval that kind of the ultimate Elliott Smith fan has listened to the podcast and heard it and liked it enough to share it. Was a real sort of badge of honor for me, I think.
Well, thank you. It was an awesome show, so definitely had to share it. And I don't know. Thank you for your kind words, Jeff.
We'll just keep talking about Charlie.
No, let's not talk about me.
We keep saying like this show I say it has to be with Charlie and Jeff. He's like, no, Jeff and Charlie. I'm like, no. Just do it alphabetically, Charlie and Jeff.
Yeah, I never put myself out there too much for many, many years, until even on Instagram. I think the only reason I even posted my face was to promote New Monkey's hat, which is still available, everybody. They have a fundraiser for the studio, and they had the hat for sale. And so that was one of the few times I showed my face until Jeff and I started this show, inspired by you guys, by the way. So
Thank you.
So it goes around. So again, you guys are kind of like working on season 4 now. Do you have an idea when it might come out, or a plan?
Yeah, I think the early part of the summer, probably around June, we're hoping to start releasing episodes. So we're working at the moment on starting to get guests and get interviews booked in, and then we'll put out hopefully the first episode around June time.
And if we think of some musician that we know that likes Elliott Smith that maybe isn't on your radar, is it okay for us to suggest them to you? Or
yeah, of course, Jeff. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, please do let us know if you have any suggestions. We're always really keen to get suggestions from people who are listening, and I think there's loads of examples in the last few years of being told by people that there are certain other Elliott Smith fans out there and being sent links to articles. And so there have been loads of times that listeners have suggested people, and then we've got in touch with them on the back of it.
I have another question. I don't know how much you want to get. You talked about it on one of the episodes about the behind the scenes of making a podcast, where people aren't allowed to kind of repeat a song that someone already chose. Is that correct?
Giving away too many secrets. We try to, as you probably.
I'm not editing anything out of this.
Yeah, I mean, we try to. Obviously, we haven't repeated a song yet, because we've always been keen to just try to cover as much of Elliott Smith's catalog as possible. But obviously, as the songs narrow down and down, then maybe we'll have to think about.
That's what I was
repeating a song. Yeah.
I mean, you could make a list of your 10 least favorite Elliott Smith songs, and they could still be like somebody's favorite song. I mean, I tried to make a list of my top 10, and I narrowed it down to 47 or something, and still felt bad about leaving some of I couldn't come close to making a top 10. It was too hard.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the early stages we were keen just to not have a podcast that's just like someone doing Angelus again.
Yeah, of course.
So we wanted to have as a kind of a broader spectrum of songs as possible. But it's been 3 years or so now, so I'm sure the songs that we've done early on aren't really in anyone's memory any longer.
There's still a lot of good songs though that haven't been talked about.
No, I think one of the last episodes was The White Lady Loves You More or something, was one of the most recent ones. And I was like, wow, that wasn't done yet.
Yeah, there's a lot of them when a guest will suggest a song to us, and then Rob and I will look back at the list or think about it. We're like, haven't we done that one? And then we're like, oh no one's done that one.
Does anybody ask for a redo, to pick another song?
I mean, a lot of times the conversation bleeds into another song that, I think what I mentioned earlier is, it's hard for me to say any one song is my favorite Elliott Smith song. So we find with the guests, they'll talk about that song, but then they'll also talk about 4 or 5 other songs that are really important to them. Yeah. And we did an episode last series with a British actor called Joe Gilgan, who he's been in quite a few things that have been popular over here in the UK, but I'm not sure whether or not he's been in things that you guys will have seen that much of. But he's a big Elliott Smith fan, but he was quite reluctant to focus on just one song. So I was like, well, actually, maybe let's just talk about 4 or 5 songs, and then we can do a slightly different format for this one. So I think we're happy to experiment a little bit with slightly different setups, especially if it means that, in that example, he probably wouldn't have done it if he wasn't allowed to talk about a range of different songs, and
I thought it would be a massive shame not to record something with him. So yeah, so we sort of changed it up a bit for that.
I did have to look up who that was. And that's another thing I like about the podcast. Like maybe half the guests, I'm like, I know exactly who that is. I'm glad they're on this. This is great. And then half of them are like, I don't know who that is. And I hear their music. I see that they wrote a book or something. So it's exposing people like me, and I'm sure lots of listeners, to people that other artists or other, people that they're not familiar with, which is a nice thing too.
Yeah. I mean, Joe Gilgun was in a film called This Is England, which is, if anyone is interested in sort of British culture, it's like set in the 1980s, and is really, really good. So definitely recommend anyone watching that if they haven't heard of it or seen it.
Well, one of the things that I really enjoy too is towards the end is that you guys don't necessarily interview fans, but you have fans represented on the show at the end by having them call in. And a couple of my friends have actually made it onto the show. Can I just ask generally what was the genesis of deciding on doing that, and what it's meant for you for the show?
Yeah, I think initially it was an idea, and Elizabeth, correct me if I'm wrong, that this was an idea that we had when Elizabeth and I were talking over email with one listener who was like, she said that it would be great to have people who listen featured on the podcast in some way. So that was sort of gave us the idea and the motivation to do it. And so yeah, it was just something that we started as a result of that conversation.
And I think it's a nice way to sort of break up the hierarchy of like, okay, this person's important. They're a guest on our show, but there's all these people that listen that are like just as big of Elliott Smith fans as everybody else. So I think incorporating their voice into the podcast is a really important thing too.
Yeah, definitely. And it's like when I was talking about the live show and actually seeing the people who are listening to it and speaking to them and having an actual conversation, it's really nice we get sent these clips and it's like, oh, okay, now it's no longer I'm just looking at listener figures on a screen, that these are actually people who are listening to the podcast and enjoying it. And sometimes, when people send stuff in, we have short conversations over email, and it's just, I mean, we're both obviously really, more than anything else, just big fans of Elliott Smith, and that's the most enjoyable thing of doing it, is just talking to other fans of Elliott Smith and about his music and about various other things. So yeah, it's been doing that as a feature. It's been really good, really good.
So you guys talked about earlier about the tribute show, and just recently a compilation came out from the show. Can you give us some background about how that came to be, and then also talk about where the funds are going from the show, and just basically the whole process of how that came to be?
Yeah, sure. So it really started off last year in the summer. We had a guest called Ben on from a band called Blarnarvin, who are based over here in the UK. And he's a huge Elliott Smith fan, and he is friends with another musician called Francis Lung, who's a guy called Tom McClung, who was in a band called Woo Life before his current solo project, which is called Francis Lung. And after we spoke to Ben, Ben and Tom had an idea to do a tribute show. This was in lockdown, so they wanted to do it online. And through Ben's management and with La Blogothèque, the YouTube channel, and La Blogothèque had been doing lots of Instagram live shows over lockdown, and so they had offered Ben and Tom a slot on their Instagram live sort of like regular schedule to do a live show, and they asked us if we would help out.
But it was in a really short time frame. They came to us it was like a week later, I think.
Yeah, it was mad. It was, I think we got emailed on the Sunday, and the show was the following month, like a
Right.
week, 8 days later. So yeah, it was really, really quick. So in sort of really quick time, we had to be like, okay, who do we know that can do this? And I think we were very fortunate in that people, because it was being locked down, people were available, and we managed to get a really good lineup of people to play. And yeah, we raised money for 3 different charities who will support LGBTQ plus communities, mainly in the US. And it was an incredible night, a really good turnout online. I think we raised around $3,000 that evening. And from then, Tom McClung has done some incredible work getting in touch with each person who played and asking them to record a version of the song that they played. And it's really been his work spearheading that compilation. And as you say, Charlie, he put it out a couple of weeks ago, and it's available on Bandcamp. All the money that is raised goes to some incredible charities. So please do go and check that out if you're watching and you're interested.
It's called Everybody Cares, and Elliott Smith compilations on Bandcamp. I think it's everybodycares.bandcamp.com, I think.
Yeah.
It might be. Yeah, it's a great compilation. And that was part of my question was, did they do basically studio versions or the live versions on the comp? But it sounds like they were all studio versions for what they had access to as musicians.
Yes, I'm pretty sure, and if Tom watches this, he might correct me. It was very much his work getting those recorded versions. I'm pretty sure that all of them were recorded separately from the live show.
Do you have any plans for a vinyl release? Because Jeff definitely wants to know that.
We'll have to ask Tom and see if we can look into the cost.
At least CD.
Cool.
Yeah.
At
Vinyl
least.
is expensive. I will buy whatever comes out.
Well, that means that you guys have to do multi-colored vinyls, because Jeff will collect them all and you'll sell them all out.
Thanks, Charlie.
That's good to know. That's good.
up to three different colors.
Yeah, I have to stop at 1 now at this point for so many variants. That makes me want to know, are you guys collectors? Do you collect albums? Do you collect posters or anything related to Elliott? DVD, CDs?
I mean, I'm not really I don't like things. I'm not really a collector, but I do have all of Elliott Smith's albums.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Yeah, I mean, same as Elizabeth, I'm not a huge collector of memorabilia, but I've got all of Elliott Smith's albums on vinyl, and various books. I've got the Autumn to Wild picture book, which is amazing. Torment Saint, which I spoke a bit about earlier. New Monkey Studio were kind enough to send us some of their trucker hats, so I've got
Cool.
I've got one of those. So I've got a few Elliott Smith bits and pieces, but I'm not really a conscious collector of anything in particular. So it's mainly just stuff that I want that I can use as well, I think.
Cool. So do you have any more questions, Jeff? I have
I don't think so. I wrote down a bunch of questions and I think they all got answered.
Sean, can I throw some favorites at you?
Of course, yeah.
Because you guys are specific to songs. How about we throw some favorites in general? So let me start with me. What's your favorite album?
My favorite album, I think, is probably the self-titled album. I was thinking about this today because I was like, I wonder what we'll talk about. And I thought maybe I should think about what my favorite album is. I think it's my favorite Elliott Smith album is the self-titled one, because I really like his songs where you kind of really feel that you get a sense of place, and when you're listening to them, you can really imagine where you are and you can imagine what he's seeing and what he's doing, and you can imagine all of these characters that he's encountering. And I think you get that most on that album. I think that feeling comes up in other songs, but it's really concentrated in that album. So, for example, in Clementine, at the beginning of that song, you know, the street's wet, you can tell by the sound of the cars, and you're like, okay, yeah, I'm in this bar, and it's almost like you're reading a book when you're listening to it, because you get that feeling of, you're just in your head, you're imagining all of these things, you're imagining where you are. And I was walking around listening to that album earlier today, and it felt, you know, you can't almost feel like you're not where you are, because you're trying to see what he's seeing. And I think that effect really comes across on that album more than any others.
Do you have the 25th anniversary release?
Yes, yeah, I do. And I love the fact that the amazing live versions came as a result of that. And I think the fact that, you know, Elliott Smith died a long time ago now, but as fans, we're still able to discover new things and uncover new recordings and different versions. And so that's always pretty exciting.
Cool. How about you, Elizabeth? Do you have a favorite album?
Question. I might have said the self-titled album before Rob said that, but I do.
You're allowed to repeat.
I do listen to Figure 8 a lot, and I get lost in there in a sense, like, you know, it's a one whole experience for me. Like, I don't necessarily pull any one song out. And sometimes when I'm even listening to it, I'll even forget, like, what is the name of the song that I'm listening to? And I'll look it up and like, oh yeah, okay. But there's a lot of kind of, I don't know, diversity that goes on in that album. I mean, I guess maybe recently I'm listening to a lot of Figure 8, but you know, From a Basement on a Hill, I feel like is maybe the album I've listened to the most. And I even, I held off getting it when it was released. I probably didn't get it for a year or two after, because I was, you know, slowly like, okay, that will still be there for me. But then when I did finally get it, there's like, I listen to Coast to Coast all the time, and I mentioned King's Crossing already. Like, there's a lot that I enjoy about that album as well.
Cool. How about you, Jeff?
I always say my favorite is Either Or.
Yeah.
I first knew who Elliott was between Roman Candle and Self-Titled, and I listened to Roman Candle a lot. When the Self-Titled album came out, I think I listened a little, like I was a fan, but I wasn't like a diehard fan. And when Either Or came out, it was just like made me become a super fan. And I specifically remember when I saw him on tour for that at Spaceland in '97 for the Either Or album, he played 3, 4, 5 songs from the Self-Titled album, which I had been semi-familiar with. And I was like, man, these songs are so good from this other album. I got to go back to listen to that more. And that's when I like got a higher appreciation for the Self-Titled album when he was playing them on the Either Or tour. But Either Or, it's just the combination of like a little bit fancier production, like kind of the bridge between like the early couple albums and then EXO. Like, it's just the right amount of lo-fi production for me, and just the songs. I mean, all the ones that I guess a lot of fan favorites, Between the Bars, Angelus, Say Yes, I love 2:45 a.m. Pictures of Me, just so many classic songs on it. So I always go with that. But I love From a Basement on the Hill too, and all of us love all of them, I'm sure. But,
yeah, I think there's an argument to say for each of them. I wouldn't argue with anyone saying that any of them are their favorites.
Certain bands or artists, you're like, how could somebody choose that album as their favorite? But you can name any album as your favorite for Elliott Smith, and nobody can argue with you.
You're not gonna lose at all.
Charlie, what about you?
It's definitely From a Basement. So the reason, there's a few reasons. I think one is because I think at that point I had heard some demos of the album, and for Tom and Joanna to go in and work with that music and pull out an amazing album like that is stunning first, and consistently for me, just an amazing record. I mean, like, there's not one bad song to me on that record, and for them to bring it together after he passed away was a beautiful tribute to him. So I think it has that quality of everything, and everything that we came to love at that time, and then the possibilities of what could have been as well was kind of intertwined in that album. And so yeah, I thought it was really cool, and I had a little influence on it too. That makes it special for me too. So
Can you talk about that
I just
influence or no?
Sure. I just at a certain point, Elliott and his girlfriend Valerie were looking at the website, and they saw some of the unreleased songs, some of the older songs that he had done live and had revisited, and wanted a couple CDs worth of material. So myself and two other fans collected these 2 CD worth of music and sent it to him. And as time went on, it started coming out that he was working on certain songs.
Be like The Last Hour and stuff like that, or like
more like King's Crossing and what else? Gosh, King's Crossing and gosh, now I have to look. I'm sorry.
you have old live versions of those.
Right, correct. Old live versions that he hadn't heard in a while.
Uh-huh.
And so like mostly on the last part of the album that came out, like, so King's Crossing was one of them. Shooting Star was another one, even though Shooting Star would become a different version from the one that was kind of out there for fans to find. Memory Lane was one. Maybe A Passing Feeling was another one.
It's like Shooting Star and the other one you mentioned, a couple of those. I mean, he was playing in like '96 and stuff like that.
Right, exactly. And some of them were actually show up again on, even as early as his high school years.
Yeah.
So like King's Crossing, for example, it was a Stranger Than Fiction song, I think. And so, but with a different name, just
3. I think 3. Is that the one that's called 3? I think
so, maybe.
Yeah.
So yeah, YouTube. And then so the fact that those songs showed up on the album, was cool, because Under the Radar also kind of mentions it too, that Elliott had gotten the CDs from a fan and it had worked them into the work he was working on at the time.
So if you didn't supply him with those versions, he might have been like, oh, I don't really remember those songs. That, like, you're supplying him with those live versions helped him anyways, like, kind of refresh himself.
Just a little, maybe.
Yeah. You don't know how much or how little. You don't know how much or how little, but it was important enough that they contacted you about it. So
yeah, it's mentioned in a like kind of supplemental website online portion of Under the Radar, connected to his last interview that they did with him.
Well, so that's a great story.
Well, thanks. But yeah, it's one of my favorite records. Another favorite, what's your guys' favorite t-shirt that he wore over the years?
I really like the one that I always think of is the 84 one.
Oh yes,
on the cover of Figure 8. Yeah. I think that's probably the one that makes me think of Elliott Smith the most. And I've got the Figure 8 cover on my wall as well. And yeah, that I always think Elliott Smith with that. And then BT Wolf, who was a guest on our podcast, has made she made like a limited selection of t-shirts with that print on, with Ross Harris, which I think they might have done for a charity thing too, which was quite cool.
Oh, really? I never saw that.
Yeah.
Oh.
I can't remember when it was, but yeah. So yeah, that's probably the one I think of.
Oh, I missed out on that one.
You can
How
ask
about
her,
you,
Charlie.
Okay. How about you, Elizabeth? Do you have a favorite t-shirt of?
Yeah, I don't have an answer to this question. I've kept my listening very separate from like Elliott as a person. Like, it actually took me a long time to finally watch that Heaven Adores You documentary. Not because I didn't want to see it, but it's just, I wasn't sure, do I want to enter into this world where I learn more about this person that I really just love his music? So yeah, I don't, like we said before, I don't really collect anything. I don't, any of the memorabilia, or even just, I know he definitely wears lots of different t-shirts, and I've noticed that, but I try not to pay attention, like, because I just really try to focus on the music.
Yeah, I get that.
That makes sense. I could go for a hat though, Charlie. You know that
hat?
picture with him wearing that Nashville hat? I think I just posted it on like Instagram stories a few months ago. So, like there's a couple shows that I recorded that when I traded them with people in the late 90s, I cut out a lot of the like between song talking. Stupidly, I did that. And so like the versions of those shows that are out there, but I think it's from the 97 Spaceland show. I found my original tape. So I retransferred it with all the talking, because I don't know if you saw, I posted about how that's the show where he met John Bryan that day. Like there's stories of that happening, like, oh, Mary Lou Lord was like, hey, this guy John Bryan, he should just play with you tonight. Like, that's the show I recorded. But I recorded Pete Krebs on one side of the tape, and then I recorded Elliott. And so I went back to the tape just a few months ago, and it does have parts that I did not ever trade with people, where he's like introduces John Bryan. Oh, John Bryan's gonna play, he's really good. And they're like setting up. Did you hear that?
Yeah, I did.
That. Yeah, like where they're setting up. So I think it might be in that show also, where he tells the story about getting that Nashville, because he plays All My Rowdy Friends, and he's like, oh, you can go to the Hank Williams Museum in Nashville and you can buy a hat that says Nashville on it. And I did, or something. So I rediscovered the part where he tells the story of that. So
that's cool.
Yeah, I used to be like, I just want to hear the songs, I don't want this. So I would like transfer it from tape to like a burned CD or whatever, once those became a thing, and I like cut out a lot of the talking. But luckily I still had that tape. So that's my story about a hat. Instead of, I don't know, I know the t-shirts he wears sometimes, but I don't really pick a favorite or anything.
Right. Cool. So kind of maybe wrap it up. Do you guys see yourselves doing other projects related to Elliott, or at this point right now you just focus on the next season of the show, or would you like to like expand on the show?
I mean, the focus at the moment is going to be on the next set of podcasts, but I think like with the live shows that we've done, I think we're always open to trying other things and doing new and different things. So hopefully when things open up a bit more post coronavirus, there may be a few more opportunities to do stuff like that. Because yeah, it's always really fun to meet people and to do other things that have a kind of Elliott Smith connection, but aren't just only doing the podcast.
Cool. And do you think you'll maybe when things open up, you might expand your, like, do you think, like, for you, Rob, will you come to the States and do some work related to Elliott here, or
Yeah, I
same
mean,
with you, Elizabeth? Or are you going to kind of go on the road somehow, maybe, and meet new people as well?
I mean, something that we've spoken about, Elizabeth and I have spoken about before, was like doing something in New York, and kind of doing something that maybe related to the time that Elliott spent there, because we've done a lot of, obviously, as you know, we've done a lot of interviews in LA, and we've done one or two things in Portland, and we thought that it might be interesting to do something in New York. So that's something that's always kind of been around in our discussions, which would be cool. Obviously, I mean, I've never been to Portland or LA, so I would love the opportunity to do that. So yeah, that would be definitely something that would be pretty exciting if I could find a particular project to work on that would take me out to Oregon or to California. That would be great.
Cool. And how about you, Elizabeth? Do you think you might go outside of LA?
I mean, maybe. I've actually never been to Portland, and I would definitely be interested in going there. Like what Rob was saying in New York, I think, Elliott's New York time is such an interesting time period that it would be interesting, if we could kind of, I don't know, produce something very specific to that time period and the places he went and the people that he interacted with. So there's, possibilities for the future.
Is that kind of almost hinting like a film kind of project? A little bit, because
You heard it here. You heard it here first.
Yeah, no, I don't think so.
But anything's possible.
Anything's possible. Yeah.
Charlie's just giving everybody projects.
Yeah.
I'm assigning everybody a new thing.
Yeah. If you want us to make a film, Charlie will make a film.
We're gonna make the Charlie film.
Yeah.
Sweet Adeline.
No.
Maybe like a musical. Sweet Adeline the musical.
Wow, I don't know where that would go.
Not very well.
I can imagine you being in it too.
I'd watch that. I definitely watch that.
We'll work on it.
It'll be on Rotten Tomatoes worst list.
Worst. We'll win a Razzie.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Let's do it for sure. So I don't know if you have any more questions, Jeff.
I don't know. Does anybody, Rob or Elizabeth, want to add anything additionally?
No, other than thanks very much for inviting us on. It was great to. I mean, Jeff, it's the first time I've spoken to you. I've spoken to Charlie before, but yeah, really nice to meet you and to speak to you both.
Yeah, definitely. It's always fun to meet people that love Elliott's music and know of you online. So
I mean, I love the discography is great as well. It's amazing.
Thank you. I try. I'm sure there's lots of mistakes, but I had to do it for my own purposes. Mostly it's to be organized and stuff. So it's fun. Thank you. All right.
So do you guys have anything you want to kind of promote yourselves, where to find you? You mentioned earlier, but I think maybe even the website's a different address versus all the Instagram, Facebook apps.
Yeah, the website's just myfavoriteelliottSmithsong.com with the proper British spelling of favorite.
Cool.
I think, do we own the domain for the American spelling as well?
We do, yeah. It bounces through that.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
I will hopefully
incorporate.
I'll hopefully save this properly and get it on YouTube, and then the YouTube description I can put that information in there.
Yes, thank you.
I'm praying that I think I just click end when we're done and it'll save it to my computer, since it has said recording this whole time. This is only my second time recording a Zoom, so
thank you guys for all you have done for the community. We are very thankful for it. It's a very original, thoughtful angle, and a lot of thoughtful people have been on the show, and it shows what point of view people have about Elliott's music, and it adds to it and gives more meaning. And we really appreciate you guys doing the show.
Definitely.
And look forward to the next seasons. Plural.
Next
Thank you.
12
And,
seasons.
we're excited about it. And yeah, thank you so much for doing it for us and for yourselves, of course. But
Yeah, no,
for us as well,
thank
as
you. It's,
fans.
really appreciate you saying that, Charlie. And we have a great time doing the podcast. So hopefully we'll keep doing it.
Cool.
All right. Awesome.
Well, thanks for being on the show. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
All right.
Thank you.
Good end.
Have a
Thanks.
good
Day
or
good night.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye.
Dude, bye.
Bye.